Hello everyone, this is Mr. Informal back with another analysis, thoughts, analysis, and rant. So, I'm late on this one, but I do want to give you my take on the Motorola Moto G7 phones. The G series phones are the mid-range phones or the mid-level phones of Motorola. Not only that, in case you don't know, Lenovo owns Motorola since buying it from Google. So, let's talk about the Motorola Moto G7 phones. My thoughts, analysis, and rant. So, during the Mobile World Congress of 2019, a lot of phone manufacturers have released their flagship, their mid-levels, their low levels, whatever you want to call it. And so, since we're talking about the G series, the mid-level, so let's talk about the Moto G series. And it's in its 7th generation. Not only that, Motorola have announced 4 models for the G7s. So, first and foremost, you have the G7 Plus. You have the Moto G7. It's going to be interesting. The Moto G7 Power. Unbelievable names. And then the last but not least, you have the Moto G7 Play. So let's talk about the G7 Plus, okay? Apparently this is for the people who love taking pictures. And it has the camera features of 16 plus 60 megapixels and 5 megapixels dual camera that is optimized for low light shooting. It has a bright f1.7 aperture with image stabilization. Not only that, all of them are powered by Snapdragon 636 chipset. And going back to the camera, it has 4K video recording 30 frames per second at 1080p. And then it also has I'm sorry, let me repeat that again. 4K video at 30 frames per second. At 1080p, it has 30, 60, 120 frames per second. It's not bad. It's actually not bad at all. And not only that, it has a 3 gigs of RAM. Oh my goodness. I'm going to talk about this later. But it has 64 gigs of storage with SD card up to 512 gigs. So it also runs stock Android 9. So not only that, it also has 27 watts of turbo power whenever it's plugged in to charge. So 12-hour battery life will only take 15 minutes, and it has 3000 milliamps battery capacity. That's pretty good. In terms of screen, that's pretty good right here. 6.2 inch LCD with a teardrop notch, 1080 by 2270 megapixel resolution with Gorilla Glass, and it has a 3.5 millimeter jack. Yes, with Dolby Audio. That's gonna be interesting. I do want to hear that. And it has Bluetooth 5.0 with aptX. And it will be around $350 to $400 depending on the models. And then we have the Moto G7. Apparently this should be, I think, the best of the G7s. So obviously it's the same with the Plus. It has the same 6.2 inch screen, same battery size, 3000 milliamps. It has 12 megapixel f1.8, so the camera is definitely different, with 5 megapixel depth sensor, so it's not a wide screen. So, the 4K recording at 30 frames per second at 1080p and 30 frames and 60 frames per second. It doesn't have optical image stabilization. It has electronic image stabilization. The chipset, Snapdragon 632. But it has 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage memory. It also has the turbo power, so and so. it will be around $300 to $350 again, depending on the model. So we had the Moto G7 Power, which from the sound of it, this should be a battery monster or even a chipset monster. So it has 5,000 milliamps battery capacity. Unbelievable. Wow. 5,000. Obviously comes with the turbo powers charger. It also has 6.2, but here's the thing, it has 720p resolution, so it's gonna last a long time. But my problem with this is that it has a 6.2 inch screen, but I'm gonna get to that later. Same thing, 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage. The cameras are different. f2.0 aperture and 8 megapixel selfie camera. It has a notch on the front and it can record 4K at 30 frames per second. So this is going to be cheaper, around $250. Last but not least, we have the Moto G7 Play. Apparently it's the most affordable. It will be in 5.7 inch screen, 720p display, Snapdragon 632, 2 gigs of RAM, and then 32 gigs of storage with SD expandability and 3000 milliamps of battery. So it has 13 megapixels camera, f2.0, 8 megapixel selfie, and 4K video. It will be around, again, $200. So those are the specs, okay? So what are my thoughts of this series? It's absolutely terrible. It's absolutely ridiculous. I cannot believe they're even gonna go through these 4 models. So I'm guessing, and I haven't done research, there will be no E series. Okay, there will be no E series, because what's the point of the E series if there's the Moto G7 Plus? Motorola is in a disarray right now, and I cannot believe they're even releasing 4 different models. Why not just do 2 models? Just make it easier for the consumer. Why do we need 4? But just to summarize my thoughts on this, I think it's not a noteworthy release. This is probably the worst G series that Motorola ever came out with, and it looks like they're trying to catch up with the market, or they're just trying to do enough to be relevant. But sadly, with so many phones this year, I don't think people will notice. And so let's get on with the analysis here. So where does Motorola really want to position the G series? Because Huawei's out, Xiaomi, I mean ZTE, you got LG, Nokia is taking over the mid-range. I mean, Google has mid-range, Asus is in there, OnePlus is the king of all mid-range. So what is the G series for? So they're spending so much R&D, research and development, for those who don't know, on the mid-range, that they decided to release 4 new models. But if I was looking at a mid-range, and you know what, let's just play this out. I have 4 types of phones here: the Plus, the G7 Plus, the G7 Play, the G7, and the G7 Power. Which one am I going to pick? Well, I don't know. The G7 Plus is for the camera person. The G7 is, I guess, the all-rounder, or the most versatile. The G7 Power has the most battery, and the G7 Play. So every one of them has a disadvantage and advantage. But this is where I'm talking about. Motorola is basically making the consumer so confused to the point where, why do I need to be confused as to which model I want? Yes, there are different price ranges, but the price range is not even that it doesn't even make a difference. Is it $100 difference? Not only that, I mean, every model will have different RAM storage, and as we know, Android is gonna get sluggish if you don't have high enough memory. You got a 4 gig variant, you got a 3 gig variant, you got a 2 gig variant. Again, it's too much fragmentation, too much confusion, and too much model differentiation. What's the point of 4 models? Why can't all models just have high battery capacity? Why? Well, as I've said in the beginning, it won't even matter much because the competition is fierce. Will the consumer, or even the consumer around the world, will even look at these G7s and just be like, what's the point of me getting this when I can get a OnePlus? What's the point of me getting this when I can get a Xiaomi or the Huawei? What's the point of this when I can get Nokias? And this what exactly what I'm saying is Motorola is trying to do enough to make themselves feel relevant, but sadly they are not relevant. So let's get on with the rant. And I can't believe that they're doing this again. 2 gig, 3 gig, 4 gig variant, and we're going to Android 9 Pie. And I know it's going to be vanilla, or Android stock, whatever. It does not matter. Why do we need to have these 4 gig, or why do we even need 3 gigs and 2 gigs? I mean, I don't understand. 4 gigs of RAM, it should be so cost effective to the point where it should just be 4 gigs all throughout the models, and then your flagship should be 8 gigs or 6 gigs. Now don't get me wrong, I like the expandability, but why does it need to have such a low RAM? And again, we're going back to 32 gigs. Yes, I know the expandability. Why can't you just put 64 gigs and then expand? Not only that, why does one model have 5,000 milliamps battery even though the G7 Plus and the G7 and the regular G7 doesn't have 5,000 milliamps? Why can't it be all the same battery capacity? If one model that has the same size can fit a 5,000 milliamp battery, why can't all models have it? By doing that, you would have all the advantage. It gets so confusing to the point where you don't even know what's going on. And the worst part about it is that every one of them has a different chipset, or maybe Snapdragon 632 and Snapdragon 636. Again, why pick 2 different chipsets? Why can't you just stick with one chipset? By sticking with one chipset, your R&D costs would actually lower, your production costs would also be lower, and your units will be higher. And if you order a lot more units, you're paying less for the chipset. It just doesn't make sense. And I'm going back to the notch again. They're just doing the copycat. They're trying to be relevant. Oh, we can do this. It's follow the leader. And the screens are tall, 6.2. I mean, if you're gonna do different models or 4 models, why can't you just make one model that's 5-inch, 5.5, 6, and 6.2? Make it easier. Look, to give them credit, it's like I like the turbo charging cable, and I do like the price, but again, there's too many fragmentation of features here to the point where Moto is leaving the consumer so confused to the point where, you know what, fuck this or screw this brand and I'm just gonna go to another brand. Nokia did it much better. 2.1, 3.1, and 4.1 or 5.1. That's it. Simple, right? But whatever that Motorola is doing, it seems like they are lost right now. And let me get to my final thoughts about this, okay? They are in a disarray right now that they don't know what type of smartphone that they want to create. They're just trying to do enough to be relevant, and they certainly don't have a good direction. And in terms of design, it's getting outdated. The only thing changed was probably add a notch. But again, it's follow the leader. Am I a Moto hater? No, because I believe that Motorola can create nice things. But you don't want to see one of the competition go bad. But at the same time, you can't help but just be frustrated as to what they are presenting to you as a consumer. You want great competition, and yet with these four models, it seems like they're not even a competition, they're just an afterthought. And sadly, seems like that's what Motorola is gonna head to. And so, ladies and gentlemen, that is my thoughts, analysis, and rant of the Moto G7 series by Motorola. I hope if you have any further comments, let me know down in the comments below. And don't forget to add me on Instagram, Mr. Informal. That's MisterInformal. And check my website at mrinformal.com. That's MRINFORMAL.com. And so, like I said, if you have any further comments below, let me know. I will see you in the next thoughts, analysis, and rant. Bye-bye.